classes, I'll basically kind of chart out the journey. So I'm a backpacker, so it's one thing to have a map, and you need maps, but it's quite another to actually get on the trail. So what I like to say is when I speak and when we kind of process material, this is like looking at the map. And I'm a map reader, I love maps. So this is sort of your map orientation to the heroic journey, but this ain't the experience of it. The experience of it is something quite different. And but you got to have the map. So my hope for this is that I will be able to sort of lay out a bit of a mapping for what the Lord has for us as men, just in the language that He sort of has given me to do this. The second thing I want to say, and then this is the only introductory comment because I just want to jump in today, is that there's a certain order in which I place the priority when I speak with men. So here's the priority. The least important thing that's going to happen during this hour and our hours together is what I say. And I don't mean that in any self-derogatory way. I just know that from experience, teaching, and working with men. It really is. That's kind of the least important thing. The next most important thing that's going to happen is the conversation that you have around the table. And the most important thing is what's going to happen at the end. And every time I speak or do any kind of work with men, I always like to have a moment of silence. Because I've come to believe in the power of silence. In fact, I think silence is where the action is. So I will simply take you through about a minute or two of just some guided silence of prayer with the Lord at the end. And that's how we'll try and close each time. And we will try and, again, be pretty tight about ending at 8 o'clock. So I'm going to go for about 20 or 25 minutes. And then I've got some questions right here. And I will actually try and get those up on a screen next time for y'all to kind of talk about at your table. And then we'll kind of come back together. I'll make a few closing comments and then have a time of silence. So if you'll look at the first chapter for a second, if you'll open up and just look at the first chapter. And I'll introduce, there's a couple little diagrams, but I don't want to talk about those this week. I just want to jump right in. If you look at the first chapter, and it's just called Searching for Heroes. And that's where I want to start. I want to talk about the search for heroes, and I want to start with a story that began many, many years ago. I don't have any memory of the story. It came from a photograph of me and my brother. I was probably 2. He was 4, as best as I can tell from the photograph. And my mother is in the picture, and we have these towels around our neck. Now you think, what are you doing with a towel around your neck? Well, just use your imagination. My brother had obviously seen the 1950 remakes of, or reruns of actually, that was in the late 1950s. That's how old I am. So that was probably the real deal. When Superman, the original Superman TV show had come out, and he had probably seen it and was just so captivated by it, he was like, Mom, I want to be Superman. And so she had stuck a towel around him to be a cape. And me too. And I have this look, I'm looking at my brother going, okay, am I doing this right? And then my brother is sort of looking off in the distance with this glow in his eye. It's really amazing. It's like at 4 years old, you think about this, he doesn't have any cognitive self-awareness of what he's doing. He just knows, I want to be Superman. What I see, that's what I want to be. Now, just think about that for a minute. You know, obviously boys, we're looking around at that age and we're mimicking everything that we see. And some of that's going on. But I want to call attention to this oddity about this. My brother and myself were trying to emulate a man that we would never, ever become like. No man can bend steel. It is this twist that interests me. What is it about a 4-year-old in his imagination that he longs, and nobody has to teach him this, he longs to be something that he can never be? Now, Obviously, in the imaginative world, you're simply letting your kids play. And you hope as they grow up out of their imaginations, they're not going to become a man who really thinks he can bend steel. You know, that's a psychotic break with reality. But again, I'm back. What is this right here? And this longing doesn't leave us. You know, we are fascinated as men with the heroic. You just take all the Superman remakes. Well, just go. I mean, what has set the box office records recently? The 22nd Avengers movie? I mean, you know, and this is supposedly the end of all in, you know, the end game. I don't know, they'll probably come up with some way to do a sequel after this one. But you know, it's just breaking all the box office records. We have this fascination with superheroes, we call those, because they are projections, I think, of our longings for something that we know we're not. I think the heroic longing is one of the deepest longings inside of every man. And he instinctively has it as a boy, and at some point in his life, it gets very confusing and he doesn't know what to do with that. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about that search for heroes and what we do with that search. The search begins when we're young, doesn't it? You think about that as a boy. Who are your heroes? Who'd you look up to? I love to ask this question. In fact, this is a great question to just start a conversation with a buddy or some friends. You know, who are your heroes growing up? You get such a glimpse into their inner life by who is heroic to them. So I ask people this all the time. You know, one of my colleagues at Christ Presbyterian Academy, where I taught for many years, he said, you know, Mickey Mantle was his hero because he loved baseball. And he grew up in that era where Mickey Mantle was like the man. I had another man who was actually one of the football coaches there, and he said there was a certain SEC quarterback that when he was 10 years old, he saw this quarterback go through what should have been a career-ending injury, push through the rehab for about a year and come back and make a dramatic recovery. And he goes, that's what I want to be like, 10 years old. My early heroes, you know, weren't so much sports figures, but I have a distinct memory of a pastor that I knew at that time who had this tremendous ability to communicate. And I just thought, man, if you can get up and speak to people without fear, it's like there was just something about that courage. And not only that, he just seemed to be a person that just had a lot of joy. And I'm like, that's what I want to be like. I remember as I got to college, one of my other heroes, because I was a musician at that time, was a folk rock singer. Some of y'all may have heard of him. He died about 10 years ago. His name was Dan Fogelberg. And his lyrics and the way he positioned himself as a poet lyrically and the way he aesthetically put together his melodies and his harmonies were so enchanting to me. It was just like, that's what I want to be like. That's the person I want to be like. Because when somebody got up on stage like that, there was something about being up on stage again, whether you're a pastor or a musician, that just felt like, man, you are the man. You can get up there and do this and have people watch you and get applause. It's like there was something heroic about that demonstration of both wisdom and strength. And that's what I want to go to. I want to talk about what I think are the three types of heroes, and I've already kind of walked through them. I think as a boy, we generally look for the strong man. Not always, but generally most boys up until adolescence and even into adolescence, they're looking for the athletic, the warrior, the conqueror, somebody who can win the day, somebody who can beat the foe. And you just think about it. If you've had boys, you know what this looks like. We're looking for that strength. There's something about that strength quality that's so core to being a man. And we instinctively, a boy doesn't, you don't need to sit down and instruct a 4-year-old. Now, I really want you to look up to strong men. You don't need to do that. They'll do that. It's something so deeply rooted in the human psyche. At some point, he moves on. And this can happen in late adolescence. And I found this to be the case when I worked with high school young men for many years, somewhere around sophomore and junior year, I said their sort of minds woke up and they realized there's something more than just brute strength. And they would often wake up into the realities of a world that seemed very chaotic and very confusing. And this is particularly the truth when they went off to college. And they started not only looking for the strong man, they started looking for what I call the wise man. This is the person who seems to know how to navigate life and how to make his way through what seem like the endless pitfalls and lies and confusion that life seems to offer at every turn. Sort of the wise man who sort of maneuvered his life in such a way that he comes out at a good place. And we instinctively look for that. But finally, I think at some point, we start looking for what I call the quintessential hero. And the quintessential hero doesn't leave behind the strong man or the wise man. He just puts those together in a different way. I call this the noble man. And the noble man is the one who takes the strength he feels and the wisdom he's been given, and he simply offers that to everyone around him. For their benefit, for their flourishment. And when I think about the men that have most affected me, and the men that I see in both literature and in myth, and in our modern myth making, which is movies, I think when I feel the heroic longing the strongest, it's that noble man. In fact, the noble man will often sacrifice and even suffer so that others can flourish. That's how committed he is to making sure his strength and wisdom is for everybody. It's just not really for him. He's not really concerned about trying to be strong or wise. That's not the point. The point is, what can I give to everyone else? So I want to show an illustration of this. Think this is going to go? I just want to show an illustration of this. This needs no introduction. I'm not going to introduce it. I just want you to watch a noble man in action. And we may need to cut off the lights. I'm not sure. This may be fine.
Okay. Steve, you're timed out.
Okay. Yep. So trying to.
The last chapter is men and technology.
Oh, yes.
Yes. I am not heroic when it comes to that. So it might get to one of you.
I am not heroic with technology either.
All right. Okay.
I probably should have given you a little intro.
Okay. Well, we had it going. All right.
20-minute waiting period.
That's all. There's a couple of 5-year-olds out in the lobby. Here we are.
We'll figure this out better next time, man. This is our.
It's the beta test.
That's right, beta test, baby.
All right, come on. I had it set up and then timed out, right?
Actually, while he's setting that up, I'll talk about one last, chapter 12. Oh, here we go. We got it. Okay. This is about a 5-minute clip.
Anybody want to lip sync? I wouldn't have thought that I couldn't get sound.
In 20 years, they're going to rip us off in Game of Thrones. I hope you signed your
That is
contracts.
bizarre. Well, you know what?
Try just hitting the little button on the bottom of the TV window.
Anybody? Come on. Come help me. Come help me.
I don't have any authority on electronic, that's for sure. I was just thinking.
Let's see. It was showing the.
It's on the headphones right now.
Yeah.
It's on headphones.
It says it's on.
Anybody
It
wanna turn that
looks
off?
it's on headphones.
Turn the. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? We'll let it go this time.
Okay.
We'll let it go. I said this is not a deal breaker. We'll set it up for next time better. Yeah, so the noble man is the quintessential man, and I want to speak about one other aspect of the heroic. Not only the strong man and the wise man and the noble man, but I want to just speak briefly about the power of our heroes. So I remember, I'm not going to name who it is, but there's a very well-known SEC coach who they had, it was the kind of the opening press day, SEC press day, I can't remember the exact term for that, but they had that, and basically there were this mass of people were waiting for him to enter into this hotel lobby. And basically when his face appeared, they were all just screaming and shouting, wanting his autograph, and people wanting to get up and touch him. And I mean, it was pandemonium. The police were trying to hold people back. And the news reporter made a comment like this: they treat this man like a god. They worship him. Now, obviously, as Christians, we know that sort of worship is not a good idea. But you think about what we do with our heroes as boys and young men. What do we do with them? We worship them. And nobody has to tell us to do that. That's the power they have over us. We put them up on a pedestal and say, "You're it." But they can't stay there. And that's the second place I want to go to today. We search for heroes, the strong man, the wise man, and the noble way. We're looking for men who say, "I know the way. This is the way in the manhood. This is what you want to be like." But at some point, all our heroes disappoint us and fail us. Every man I've ever looked at, and this is one of the stories of my life, every man I've ever looked up to has let me down. And some of that has what I've been called has been a drip, 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 drip. Like the place I put them on, they couldn't stay. Just slowly, it's like, oh. And then sometimes it was shattering. I mean, a person that I put up to look up to as a model, and something happened, and it just shattered. So 2 quick stories. One was that pastor I spoke about. That was a drip, 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 drip. Into my 20s, I got to know him at a different level, as sort of on a man level. And I found out from somebody who worked with him, said, you know, that there was a concern he had for the pastor because he didn't have any friends. I was like, what? He's like, no, what you see is kind of what he puts out for people, but nobody really knows who he is. And I'm like, I didn't know what to do with that. It's like, wait a minute. This was the man, and it's like, all of a sudden I started asking, what is he hiding? I mean, he doesn't really have any close male friends. I didn't know what to do with that. It was so confusing. Here's a shattering incident. I had when I went to college, I went through this really difficult time of doubt, despair. I mean, I traipsed through all the world religions. I went through all the philosophies. I was trying to figure out what's true, what's right, what's good. Is there a God? I don't even know. And I went to a philosophy class just hoping this guy was going to be my wise man. I didn't have that language for them, but I was like, just show me the way. And the whole class that I remember was basically spent thinking about, you know, logical puzzles and psychological conundrums, like, you know, when a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, does it make a sound? I mean, you know, or how does a blind person see green? And I remember thinking, I mean, and people would get into these sort of silly debates in the class, and I remember thinking, there has to be something more than that. But the real shattering came when I was walking after class one day, and I just innocently was walking up behind this philosophy professor, and he was talking to another professor of his. And I overheard him saying, like, he couldn't wait to go to this philosophy convention because he was going to have a chance to party and get drunk. And I'm telling you what, it was like, I put this guy up here, and it was like something inside of me just shattered. I was like, look, I've been in college long enough, I've smelled enough stale beer and vomit the next morning. Whatever is true and good and right in the world, that ain't it. It was a complete shattering. I didn't know what to do with that. Now, this is where our search for heroes becomes very confusing, because the people that we put up, they can't stay there. And so we do several different things with that. You know, sometimes we go, well, we sort of had these platitudes like, well, they're just people, you know, everybody makes mistakes. And at the same time, we sort of keep this sort of, maybe somebody will come through for us, and that's why we have this sort of building anticipation about the new CEO of the company, or the new pastor of the church, or the new headmaster of the school. They're going to come and save the day. Or the new politician in government. Somehow they're going to make it all right. And yet, they don't. Do you see this push-pull we have? I see men over time sometimes, what happens is they get so disappointed with so many men. They take that heroic longing and they just push it down. Some men I know who have been savagely abused or abandoned by male figures, they take that longing, they lock it up in a closet, they put padlocks on it, and they throw away the key and go, I will never go there and think that again. But I'm telling you what, when we lose, when we let go, when we push aside that heroic longing, and refuse to listen to what it's telling us, even when it's so painful, something is deeply lost inside of us. Now, I want to go to my last point today, which is, what's the Bible's take on all of this human experience that we have with heroic? Here's what I think is the Bible's take on this. I want to start with Paul's summary statement of all of humanity. Very familiar verse, probably to most of you. Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. I used to camp out on the first part. We've all sinned. We've missed the mark, right? And we've fallen, but I never quite understood, what, fall short of the glory of God? Like what? And in my studies in the heroic, all of a sudden this clicked. It's like we fall short. And the word in the Greek has the idea not only falling short, but basically being destitute, being denuded, lacking something. We don't have. We fall short because we lack what? God's glory. Now, glory is one of the most important words in the biblical narrative. And the idea in the Hebrew word, kavod, means basically the heaviness. It's kind of an odd sense. Heavy, weighty. And the idea is that the glory of God is when He appears and manifests Himself, and He makes such an impression, He carries such weight that He literally makes marks wherever He goes. When the Lord shows up, everybody pays attention. Nobody's left the same. Everybody's transformed. That's glory. When you see this all in the Old Testament, you see this in the transfiguration of Jesus in the New Testament. The glory there is just like, oh my, that's Him. But the glory was meant to be ours. It's the whole idea of the opening of the Bible in Genesis 1 and 2. We were meant to live in that glory, to bathe in that glory, to have that glory, not only enjoy it looking to God, but have that emanating in us, through us, and out from us. That was to be our heritage. But of course, the fall of man is basically, no, God's holding out on us. You're not really good. We can manage life on our own. And somehow we all not only inherit the fall, but repeat the fall. And we turn and think glory is going to be found elsewhere. And we're going to try and find glory on our own. And we turn away from the source of glory, and we become what I call half men. Or to use a mythical term, we become wraiths. We become ghost figures. We live in this sort of shadow world of men where we exist, but we really only half exist. We're not what we're supposed to be. And that's one of the core things every man knows about himself, irrespective of race or religion. They know they're not what they're supposed to be. Now, if you've been with me and followed so far, you're probably already seeing the connection between glory and the heroic, don't you? A man's glory, when we see the heroic, all of a sudden we get this little faint glimmer of the glory. And we go, that's it! Something in our heart leaps. It's just the faintest glimmer, but sometimes it's a very powerful laser-like beam that just cuts right through us. I think the heroic longing is a compass. And it's a compass guide back to the North Pole of deep fellowship with the Lord. Because in that heroic longing, there's a trace, there's a leftover burning cinder inside of all the ash and fallout of the sin in the world. There's a little glowing ember of what life was meant to be. And I feel like, in fact, I know deeply that when a man begins to take that glowing ember and go, Lord, lead me forward in through all the disappointment and confusion. Lead me forward into this. He will. That's my story. Now I want to end on this note. Just to clarify, I deeply believe what is heroic is manhood. It's the glimmer of a man before the fall. The noble man who takes that inherent strength and wisdom, it's just a part of his core, and he offers that to those around him. So what I'd like for you to do at your tables now is just to have some conversation about our search for heroes. And here's the way I've set it up. We're going to do this for I'm going to let y'all do this for about 20 minutes. And if you don't get through all the questions, that's not the point. The point is just to have the conversation. So let me walk you through the questions. What man was heroic to you as a boy, as a young man? Tell the story. Go back. What characteristic made him seem that way to you? Why was he heroic to you? Tell that story. Second question, 3 types of heroes: strong man, wise man, noble man. Pick a characteristic of each one, and then name a book or movie with each one. Go back and think about what are the stories that I know. That's the strong man, the wise man, the noble man. Think about that. Explain why you chose that. And again, in your group, you don't have to each pick a strong man, wise man, and noble man. Maybe y'all can just do that collectively. Just come up with a kind of a collective list. Number 3, how have your heroes failed you? Take an example and explain what happened. What'd you do with your disappointment? And then if there's time, I just gave you a quote here at the end. We long for men to be more than what they are because they were supposed to be that way. Just respond to that any way you want to. So I know some of y'all may be table leaders. I may not be a table leader there. Y'all are used to doing this, I know. So anything else I need to say about leading discussion, Roger? Okay. Good. All right, y'all go at it. Have the conversation with each other for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'll pull you back together for a few last minute things, and then a moment of silence.
I know we've all had them, but I had heroes who let
He was funny when
This is what we
My hero has been cut.
Stay the man. He was good looking.
Well, I went to his last game,
straight. And he appeared some level of wisdom, which was no in the world. He was like the opposite guy who could follow his way through anything. I guess you can. And then we're off college outside of the like they have that ability to achieve.
Wait a minute, save that thought.
And then I started raising.
Nobody will believe it. Make your mouth
I read all the time, and so I hear all
I'll tell you why I think it's interesting
And we were kind of like, we were kind of the misfits a little bit, because like, there were taller kids and greater athletes on he was so trying to figure out where everybody's screen when it came right into it, and like going out on the field, the right places.
they would run, get struggles, so I never wanted that parallels to basketball at the top of the can.
Guys that are giving it like Moneyball. How to do that? Looked at us. They're like, we're going to kill these kids. And be like,
But he helped you at one time.
I mean, but I never really, I don't really know what he was. Right. But he was. I don't often do it. But if you're
But he was one of
like
I mean, when kryptonite, kryptonite, he doesn't just sit there and say, oh my God, I have this with him.
My grandfather is Gordon Inman. He also gave the money to the
Heroes in general.
And growing up, I always kind of saw his passion for helping others with their he's very wise.
My hero was my dad. As I've gotten older and learned more about him, the stronger hero he's become. His life story was he was an orphan at 16 in 1931. So he was literally a penman taking his chance. Joined the Navy, 21 years in the Navy, worked hard his whole life, became a leader in the community, well respected, high integrity. And that's the thing I remember people saying, oh, your dad is so great, he does so much. And when he died, we his funeral and told the stories about
This guy, it's like, amazing.
and then so he did all these things without drawing attention to himself, even in our family. We didn't know that. You know, he and 3 other guys in the community, small community, rural community, basically paid a dollar to set up shop in the community so the community could.
Nobody here to pray that prayer. That told me we're dying on Saturday. So Saturday came and next week. I think God will something else. Last year. God has something for me to do, so I'm not basically so probably Friday, I'll tell you this guy, he was because
You think even strong man strangers, strong man character.
like you know, your brother.
I think that's a real
So we got to interfere God.
Yeah, okay.
You all know my preacher, 15-year-old. Jesus loves your mind, soul, and body. And then my buddy Charlie Hickman raised the invitation. And so, got ready for the invitation. Nobody probably I do it wrong, did I say the thing wrong? And then he sang second verse. Louis Johnson was 9. He was 9, I was 15. I'm on the way thinking, Lord, did I do this wrong? I read the verse and all what happened, only one did.
So you learn
50 years later, I'm 65. I'm in a funeral home. He sang Holy Gary. All of a sudden it's got Jack Wheeler. Thank you for telling us his story. I'm the father of Louis Johnson. He's been a pastor for 35 years. Jack Wheeler was shocked because I thought I'd done negative and I'd done a poor job. I didn't feel good thinking about that Louis Johnson thing. Louis Johnson was a winner. So I got a reward 15 years later. I was 65. Now I'm 80. And I'm so thankful for the people in my life. That's happened. I didn't know when. This happened. Mickey Battle let me down. So did some other people. So a lot of people.
Anybody that I've looked at, I've found people that I counted as
That's a lot of strength in our skills.
want to be like him. Never got into that. I don't know why. That's why caught my attention. I got 3 kids, and maybe one of them has a hero. For some reason, I was the leader of my group. It worked out that way. I was one of the people.
I do think that's a cultural change.
He really brought it in from
That we don't have as many heroes. The younger you are, probably less you look for heroes.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, it becomes so self-centered, and it's just, and everybody just quits shit almost.
I think we got part of it to expand.
I mean, I'd be interested to ask my kids, who are your heroes?
Right.
I don't hear that kind of language coming from them.
That's it. And the time it was kind of like the opposite. His attitude is good enough to get it. So we need to raise our access. We may need to fight for the world. Watched how he is that was fascinating. And this is what I heard. No matter what happened to society, but we didn't have animation. So this is great. But they don't need any violence. That's the result of violence. Yeah. It's certainly they haven't hit and the stages. Those are just learning. Those are just
Surfing into like that. If I do this, I don't know. Yeah, so that's it comes back to that.
We don't have this. Just like
I have no idea. Only here.
Captain heroes. Always really experienced. He always had the idea. Yeah, but well, that's a good example. They're all right. Actually, lost the this guy who was figuring out how to get this man just listen to and that's why I just got to real true. So they're like all I need to obtain glory is discipline. I didn't really, I wasn't a strong fan. I started watching this movie from that. I also, but it is a natural thing. It's entertainment. There's a lot of probably Derwitz in the 007 character, but he started to experience lives growing up and how he comes in from all bases, right? I mean, he considers that playing the trend in this movie, like James raises the feet. As you then see that, you have more and more Star Wars movies, and all the matters on my life. Star Wars is very different. It is so about 24 hours in terms of the story.
current next to it, but it has
It's because it's a simple concept.
right, but there's a lot of
Right? Have right to each other.
I think you guys the power of death, which is sort of George spent a lot of time. Because there's like parallel, stories.
Take another minute, finish up your conversation wherever you are.
People in my generation Star Wars but that's a little older than I see comic you see in the Marvel universe in the 60s or even earlier. I like fundamentally they didn't have that I want to talk about visualizing Star Wars. The power of the hero image on the screen. It's like, forget Star Wars narrative compared to the Avengers. It's like Star Wars stories actually you know, probably visuals gotten so crazy. I'm sitting there like when you was talking about when we the end of breakfast the last
All right, let's kind of come back together. Hate to interrupt all this good conversation. I've been eavesdropping just a bit. Hey, so I'm curious, just to come back together, I'm curious, if y'all could just, for this number 2, just throw out some names. Who are some names that were thrown out for the strongman? Just anybody. Say it again. Just say them loudly. Hercules.
John Wayne.
There you go. Who else? Good. John Wayne. Anyone else? Strongman.
Samson.
Ah, yes. Even though he was kind of a blithering idiot, he's still the strong man. That's right. Wasn't the wise man. What about wise man? What y'all throw out for wise man?
President Lincoln.
Lincoln, yes. You know who mine was here? Yoda. My strong man here was Maximus. That's what I always use. Wise man. What about the noble man?
Pastor.
Say it again.
Pastor of the church.
Yes. Who else? Nobleman. Story or movie? Or real life? Nobleman.
Interesting.
William Wallace, which we missed.
William Wallace, yes. Martin Luther King. Billy Graham. You think about men that simply give themselves for the sake of others. Yeah. Okay. Just an opening conversation today, just to kind of get us going. Again, if you can, read on into chapter 2 for next time. And we're going to be talking about the Father effect, which is the title of that chapter. I'd like to close today with just a moment of silence. It's going to be about 2 minutes of silence, and I'll just make a very brief comment. For me, silence is the place where we become, it's the journey to become heroic and stay heroic only happens in the silence. And it's the place where we feel and experience communion with the Lord and that glory that we've lost. So I'm going to do sort of 2 motions in my silence. I'll simply ask you for the first minute to simply, whatever our conversation, whatever's happened this morning, whatever that's stirred in your heart, just take that to the Lord. Just talk to Him. And then the second motion will be, I'm just going to ask you to simply, as best you can, be still and quiet. Just be with Him. Just stop, as best you know how, and just be with Him, because He is here and He is in us. So now, Father, hear our prayers. Thank you that you always hear us as your sons. Take a moment now and just speak to the Lord, whatever's in your heart. quietly. And now take a moment, just be quiet before Him. Amen. Man, it's just been great to be here with you today. Thanks for coming and just the good reception and the good conversation. We'll continue this on. Really look forward to being with you next week. Anything else we need to say? All right, I'll be up here. If you got any questions or want to speak to me afterwards, I'll stay around for a bit. Thank you all. Lord be with you. Have a great day.
Arthur DeArmond.
Arthur.
So what is your definition of wisdom versus nobility?
Nobility is the man who uses his strength and wisdom for everybody else. The wise man
does not act.
The wise man can be wise, but not necessarily. It's not that he doesn't use it for anybody else. It's just that we don't necessarily see him that way. So, in other words, a wise man can be somebody that, like my Dan Fogelberg guy, I thought he had sort of figured life out. And but as I got older, I realized he didn't necessarily. It really wasn't about giving that to other people and let them flourish. Does that make sense? So in other words, it's sort of a gradation. You move from one to the other, I think, developmentally as a man. So if that helps.
Yes, it does. It helps. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Rich.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, I was thinking about the heroes a little bit, and I was thinking about my high school years, like kind of drawn to the tragic hero, like the Jim Morrisons, and like Kurt Cobain is a big hero for kids today. What do you make of that?
So,
or do you get into that?
Oh, no. So what was it about them that made him heroic to you?
I guess it's, I don't know. It seemed noble in a weird way, in probably a sick way, right? Like, you know, maybe strong. Yeah, I don't know. Probably not really strong.
This is where I put them. I put them as sort of a reverse wise man. It's sort of like they're basically even though they basically, even though their whole world was darkness, they simply had the courage, at least in their terms and the way we perceive them, as like speaking that and saying, you know, this is the truth and don't sugarcoat it. And it's sort of, we looked at them as sort of like icons because they simply sort of saw through what they would consider to be the fluff and the rosy colored glasses of life, and it's like, this is the way life really is. And we almost, I think, took what's the word, sort of pleasure in that a bit, and that's why they became heroic to us. Does that make sense? At least I'm thinking about my own connection with that sort of figure, the tragic figure.
I think that makes sense.
Because the truth is, life's filled with tragedy.
Right, and ultimately...
And to downgrade that, and so they're just like, no, it is tragic.
Yeah. And ultimately, when we find that, really see through the facade, there's some tragic.
There is something tragic, and they're basically trying to see through the facade, and we kind of go, yeah, you are trying to see through it, even though they don't see through long enough beyond the tragedy. So you like Kurt Cobain?
I'm not drawn to Kurt Cobain, but it was more Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison, oh yeah, oh that sort of, yeah.
The song Hero from Foo Fighters?
I'm sorry?
Actually, Hero? I do, and I've heard it once.
Kurt Cobain.
Oh yeah.
Hero.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Good to meet you. Yeah, good to meet you.
I'm glad you're here, man.
Came across this YouTube channel, and it's this recording engineer, producer, and he goes from studio to studio, walking us through all the gear that, and then he also goes through songs. So like breaks it down the audio. So he'll play like just a guitar part, just a drum part, and then he'll start meshing it all together with the guy who tracked it. So he did Hero the other day.
How about that?
And he played it. Warren Hewitt, produced like a pro, and he goes through, and so he looks at the guy and goes, "What's this song about?"